Hi, it's Alison McIntyre at Electric Scotland. I just thought I'd do a wee review of what's been happening this year, 2017, but I thought I might add a little bit of personal information to give you some background. Since I've retired, I've actually spent a lot of money doing research on a whole variety of things. And I was particularly interested in education because one of the things that I found out this year was that New Zealand have been doing a big 40-year study about the importance of children, their first 4 years of life. And this has been mirrored also by research in the States as well. And they've concluded that the early years, the first 4 years of a child's life, are actually more important than any other period in their life, because that sets the scene for the future. And from what I can see, it's probably why there's so many problems in the world. I mean, basically the study found out that if you have poor early years, you're far more likely to end up in prison, have health problems, have job problems and all kinds of issues. Whereas if you have a very good and productive first 4 years, you're more likely to be a well-rounded person that does well in life. And I can't help but think that in Africa especially, that must be an issue because there are so many children that are starving and everything, and also in Yemen and the Middle East. I'm wondering if we're stacking up a whole pile of problems for the years ahead. So it's these things. I mean, when I think of myself, for example, I know that my parents have been trying to have a baby for many years and hadn't worked out. And I think when my father said they saw a doctor in Iran, because my father was out there with the oil company, and he recommended they went on a world cruise. He said that'll probably sort the problem out. And actually, fact, that's how I came about, because I was obviously conceived in that world cruise they had, which included going to Australia and things like that. And I have some pictures from that time in Australia that my father took, and I think I've got them on the site in actual fact. Not many, but a few. And I know that my father decided I had to be born in Scotland, and so he sent my mother back to Glasgow, and I was born at Rotten Row Hospital. Terrible name for a hospital, but apparently it was one of the best in those days. So that's when I made my appearance, and when I was 6 weeks old, I was flown back to Iran. But then, when I was 6 months old, apparently I was the youngest British refugee to be kicked out of Iran at the time of the problems with the Shah and everything. And they wanted to nationalise the oil industry there. So I actually got my picture on the front page of the Daily Express newspaper. And so you can see me wrapped in my wee blanket, and part of the words are Alistair McIntyre, youngest refugee to be kicked out of Iran, or something close to that effect. Of course, I don't remember any of that, but it's just interesting, because that's the first 4 years of my life. The next bit I remember was we had a house in Prestwick, and I think it was quite a large house with a very big garden, a big massive wall at the back. And I think it was I think there was 3 families living in that house. But when you went through the back gate, through the wall, you actually went straight onto the golf course. I don't know what golf course, but a golf course I certainly remember. And I know my father got me a wee set of golf clubs, and I did whack a few balls at that time. But I also remember there was a kind of greenhouse business there, and the old fella that ran it, he would give us wee miniature tomatoes to eat, and took us around the place. I'd say maybe 3 years old or something like that I would be at the time. And I remember that because he was a nice old fella. And obviously he had time for us kids. Then I remember when I was about 3.5, I was taken to Malta because my father had joined up with Wimpy, and he was the site accountant for building the big NATO buildings. I think it was NATO buildings in Malta. So we had a flat there overlooking Valletta in the harbour, and it was beautiful. I mean, I'm sure you could pay a fortune today to get a view like that, because there was the British warships where they used to play the, what was it, Reveille or something in the morning, and whatever they do at night. But the bugle would play and stuff like that, and you could hear all that going on. It was quite amazing. And I remember some things in Malta that I had a good time. There was no sand in Malta, or not much sand. There was some sandy beaches. I remember there was I think it was the Palm Beach hotel there, and I remember going there. All it was a sandy beach cove, and there was no houses anywhere near it at all. And many, many years later, someone took a picture of that, and it was just jam-packed with multi-story hotels. So I mean, it was quite, it's just amazing, my memories and the difference that it had a number of years later. I remember also there was a wee march in Malta complaining about the British, apparently, or the English, I think my father said, and he yelled down from the balcony, "We're Scottish!" And apparently they got a hurrah from everyone, you know, and a wave. And I kind of remember a little bit of I went to the teeny army school there. So, you know, in the morning, an army bus would come with a sergeant on board, picking us kids up and dropping us off, and we had lessons. That's the first book I remember reading there. It was about a raven, and at that time we were told that, you know, if we finished the book, we could pick another one, but we'd have to show that we had read the book. So the teacher asked some questions, and I was able to give a correct answer to all her questions. She said, "Now that's how you need to do it." And she said, "Okay, Alistair, you can get another book." So I remember reading very early and obviously enjoying it. And then the contract came to an end. I think we were there 2 years, and my father then joined Kuwait Oil Company, which was half owned by BP and half owned by Gulf. And I think the American side did the field work and the British side did the admin. So from that point of view, I had to come back, and I think we had a house in Grangemouth at that time. My father had bought one because he also had been building the BXL chemical plant. He was the site accountant for that, for Wimpy. And he saw a house across the road from the hotel we were staying at, and decided to buy it as a permanent base for us in the UK. So we were there for 6 months. I went to school for a term there, and then we were flown out to Kuwait, and we got permanent married quarters. I think it was 19th Avenue we stayed in. Quite a big palatial house it was, actually, a nice garden and stuff. And I went to the school there in Ahmadi, which was the kind of expat town in Kuwait. Very good school. I seem to remember there's a lot of Welsh teachers there, funnily enough. But they were excellent. So I went there till I was about 10 and a half. It's funny when you're young that the half year is important, you know. Later in life, half year is nothing. But I was 10 and a half and I was sent to Dollar Academy in Scotland. This was a boarding school. And I noticed, in fact, this year, 2017, Dollar Academy was voted the best private school in Scotland. I don't know if it was the whole of the UK or just Scotland, but I think it was just Scotland that the thing was done. But great school, got everything done. I had a good golf course there, so I played golf there. I actually got a hole-in-one. And at the time, Dewars was doing a special deal with the golf courses. Say if anyone got a hole-in-one and someone would back up that you got one, they would send you a bottle of Dewars whiskey. So I immediately filled in the application form and everything, and lo and behold, I received my bottle of whiskey, and of course the boarding house master came to me and said, "McIntyre, I didn't see you in my study." I went, "Oh God, here we go." And he says, "What's this bottle of whiskey?" I said, "Ah, it arrived." He said, and I explained how I got a hole in one at golf and I'd applied for the bottle. And he said, "Oh, well, that's all right then." He said, "Well, I'll keep this until you go out to see your parents at the end of the term," which he did. So, and I say that I love the boarding school. I wasn't particularly fit, but I did play rugby there. Reasonably successful after a passion, and played golf quite regularly. But they had a full athletics team, so you could do the javelin, sprints, marathons and everything there. In fact, the marathons at school, I wasn't terribly fit at school, I have to admit. So me and Ron Johnson were both a bit tubby, you might say. And one year we decided to run it together, and we came in last equal. We kind of joined hands and went side by side up the narrow. And actually they were very good, because we did that about 3 years in a row, came in last equal. And somehow the teachers gave me the kind of like, whatever the last position was. My name was above Ron's, but it bracketed and said equal beside it. And the following year, Ron's name was on top and I was at the bottom, but again bracketed equal. So I thought it was very fair there, The teachers on the whole were pretty good. We always had our favourite teachers, of course. And I joined the Scouts, so I got all that done, and I did the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme, bronze, silver and gold. And that led to other things, like I learned judo and that kind of thing, and we used to go 2-night camp trips and stuff like that. We did one overnight for the silver, I remember rightly, but the gold you had to do 2 overnights. And I remember one year we were just on the verge of taking our O-level exams, and we had horrendous weather on that trip, and it was a 2-nighter. And so the second night we were soaked, totally soaked, and I think the chap I was with said, "I think I'm going to come down with a blinking cold, and I don't want a cold when I'm doing my blinking O-level exams." He said, "Well, we do," and I thought, I said, "Well, look, let's just abandon and we'll get back to the boarding house." And that's what we did. Basically, we had to hike a fair amount to get to the road. Then a guy picked us up in his van, and he was going to Alloa, so we got to run into Alloa, and then we went to the bus station where we got a bus that took us to Dollar, and then we reported into the boarding house, And after that, I was told to go up and report to the controlling officer for the Duke of Ed's award. So I reported in, said we were back, sorry we left it early. And he said, "Well, actually," he said, "that was quite a trek you did, even though you got bus and a lift and stuff," he said, "because you had to walk a long distance to get out of that." So he said, "I think we can pass you on that one." Anyway, so we had all that, plus I was in the RAF Cadets, and I got a marksman's badge for 303 rifle shooting. So that was one of the awards I got. I also went into an army course to learn how to do radio. So that was interesting as well. Basically to begin with, I used to go back to Kuwait in the Christmas and Easter holidays, and then my parents would come out. They had a 6-week leave in the summer, so they came back and we stayed at our house in Grangemouth for that. And I always remember telling my parents, because if you don't do in those days there's no internet, so it was just you got a letter, and I always said if I got one of these airmail letters, which was just paper with you kind of opened it up and the letter had been written to you, but you couldn't put anything in that. So anytime I actually got a genuine envelope, I knew my father maybe sent me a £5 or £10 note in there, so that got opened immediately to see. He said, if I had known that, he said, you'd have got every letter on envelope. So anyway, I had a great young life, but I certainly think, because the first 4 years that took me to Malta, but as I say, I'd already been in you might say in Iran. I'd been in Pressway, been on the golf course and eating wheat tomatoes and all kinds of things going on there, learn to swim, stuff of that nature. So I had a pretty good young life there. I think that's seen me doing well for the rest of my life anyway. But as I say, to me, when I see people and they're having problems in their relationships and they've got young kids, I just think, that's going to harm these kids for the future. They're not going to be, as good members of society as they should be, and not be as successful as they should be, because if there's tension in the family home, that's got to hit the kids. I never actually remember having my parents having any problems at all until much later on in life. But certainly in these early years, my parents were great. So that's one of the things I learned this year, and I keep thinking that the trouble with places in Africa where they keep fighting in Yemen and and the Middle East and everywhere that's going on, they're damaging their kids. So what is the next generation going to look like? It's going to look terrible, and I can only say that I think there's going to be a lot more problems for at least another generation, if not more. So you need to know these things and be aware of them, and hopefully parents out there with young children will realize how important it is that they have a good early life. Very, very important, because that's going to set them up for the rest of their life. So if you don't do a good job at the early years, they're going to suffer for it. And you're to blame, I have to say. You're to blame. So give them as wide an experience as possible. You might say that in some ways I'm a conservative, in other ways I'm almost a communist, because I have, for example, I'm very keen on this universal basic income. I just think that that's the way forward, where everyone gets a basic income, and that, in my view, that basic income needs to be a decent income. Not giving you maybe luxuries, but you have the right to a roof over your head, you have the right to enough food, enough warmth, and stuff like that. So, and I think these days you need to have an internet connection in with that. And so you need a television, you need a computer, or I suppose an iPhone these days, whatever. But all that needs to be factored in so you can have at least a basic, decent life, albeit maybe you don't have money to do other things, but at least you've got the basics of life. So you don't need to worry where your next meal's coming from. You've got enough money to have that meal. And I think parents need to be educated as well as kids, to be honest with you. We see people buying and wasting food. There's literally billions being wasted and people throwing out perfectly good food. And, we've seen these programs where if you go to the rubbish bins outside the big Walmarts and Tesco's and the big supermarkets, you see bins full of perfectly edible food just being thrown away. It's terrible. It should be an offence somehow or other. And then you look at how everything in the supermarket has to be perfect. It's not perfect, they don't buy it basically. So as a result, you get a very high percentage of a crop of carrots, parsnips, turnip, whatever, that are kind of, they're not perfectly formed, they're a bit crooked and stuff like that. Well, the supermarkets don't want crooked carrots, so they have to be thrown away. And I can't help but think, there must be better ways of dealing with all of these things. For example, I've read, I've been reading tremendously more this year than I have in past years. I tended to skim things before, but now I'm kind of retired and taking it a bit easier. I'm actually reading complete books now. One of the things I've learned is both the First World War and the Second World War. In Britain, we had state canteens, basically. And from what I can see, we were never more healthy as a nation than during these two world wars. And the meals that were served up were nutritious, because the government made sure that you got the kind of base vegetables and all the proteins and stuff you needed. to have a healthy life. And some of these canteens in Poland were great. I mean, you had to pay for the meal, but it was very cheap. And you could pay a little extra if you wanted like a biscuit or something like that, or a scone, or a little luxury item, because these were available, but at a price. And I can't help thinking, like, if you're making a stew, for example, all of these misshapen vegetables, you wouldn't even know they were misshapen by the time they're peeled up and put into stews and stuff like that. And I remember watching the Jamie Oliver film about tackling obesity in America. And I remember when he went to this school, when he went to this class, he laid out all the normal vegetables, you know, tomatoes, mushrooms, carrots, all kinds of things. And the kids in that class couldn't even name one vegetable correctly. I mean, he showed them carrots. I think some wee boys thought it might be beetroot. You know, I mean, it was just appalling. I mean, fairness to the teacher, after that, she was appalled. And so she went out and deliberately taught the kids. So when he went back a few months later, all of the kids knew what each vegetable was. But, you know, I think that's a parental problem as well as a teaching problem. And I think maybe we need to get more parents involved in the classroom somehow or other. Or the parents need a special coaching session for doing parental work to emphasise how important it is that they teach the kids how to do things. I know one in Britain, there was one wee boy that was always causing lots of problems at school. And they found out he was eating just almost pure sugar most of the time. He was hyperactive and everything. And when he persuaded him eventually to eat a reasonable meal, he calmed down and became one of the best kids in the class. But that was just the wrong food he was eating caused all these hassles and problems. Well, if we don't know about those, we need to teach the parents about that. So, I mean, I'm very much in favour of these first 4 years and making sure parents are educated enough to look after the kids in these early years. I think it's a parental responsibility, but it's perhaps a government responsibility to put classes in force for the parents so they can learn how important these things are. And I say universal basic income, I'm very much in favour of that, because once you've got that basic income, your basic needs are met. The only problems I can see on that is when people live in very expensive areas like London or Edinburgh, especially in the more central parts, because property prices are just huge at the moment. And I don't think that's sustainable in the long run. I can't see how it can be sustainable in the long run. But certainly the universal basic income will somehow have to take into account where people are living. And that, I think, is going to be that's the single biggest problem I see as being an issue. But so from that kind of case, you might say I'm more left-wing, because I'm also really appalled at how many kids in Scotland are starving. And the same thing happens in Canada. We've apparently 1 in 10 kids in Canada just don't have enough to eat. That's appalling. Why are we spending money on charity overseas? We should be sorting out our kids at home, but the same happens in Scotland. The people at the very bottom are being left behind. And no matter if you're a left-wing politician like the SNP and the Labour, I mean, the fact is they haven't fixed those basic problems. And there's something wrong with these people, because they have a good life. They're getting big salaries. So perhaps they don't really give a damn. They just spout the words because they think it sounds good. But do anything practical about it? No. I mean, 10 years of an SNP government, and we still have a whole pile of kids that starved or having problems at school, all kinds of issues. That should have been stopped dead. But unfortunately, it would appear that the members of Parliament we get are not well educated. They're pretty thick when it comes to things. And they have no imagination of how to resolve these issues. That's just pure bad. And I say that the more I think about this Scottish independence, I mean, there's so many Scots that were born and raised in Scotland that now live and work in England and the rest of the UK for that matter, as well as being overseas. I don't know why we'd want to be an independent country. In many respects, we are a very distinctive part of the United Kingdom. I mean, pretty well everyone knows, well, not everyone knows Scotland, but a lot of people that are in the know Scotland. And of course, the trouble is people don't want to talk to us. When you leave Scotland, you're somehow like a deserter. You're a traitor to Scotland because you've left Scotland. I mean, that's just mind-blowingly stupid. I mean, the Scots went out in the world and they've done enormous things for the world. I mean, almost every country in the world has benefited from the Scots that went and settled and lived there. Or someone just worked there for a number of years and came home again. But if you look at the Scottish contribution to the world, it's absolutely immense, especially for a tiny wee nation. We should be hugely proud of the Scots that left Scotland and went out into the world. But unfortunately in Scotland, they don't give a damn. And that's the attitude, that's education. We're not taught about what the Scots did. That's why if you go to my website, you'll learn all about the Scots that left and went overseas and all over the place. But there again, history isn't something that's most people are that interested in. I think some would say, at one time saying, only 1% of the population is interested in history. That's pretty bad. Because you can learn so much from history. I mean, reading the biographies of people, I mean, it's just amazing what some of those people have done. Like, what was the one I read recently? It was General Douglas, I think it was. But he was Lieutenant General in New Brunswick in Canada. And that was the time when the huge fire raged because they got out of control and burnt down most of Fredericton, the main town in the area, as well as the woods. I mean, it was a horrendous time, but he took charge, did a wonderful job, and managed to rebuild very quickly New Brunswick. And later he was the Lieutenant General in the Ionian Islands, which are around Greece. And again, if you read what he achieved there, I mean, that had been part of the Ottoman Empire as well as Greece, and frankly the people were in a very poor state, and the country was a bit of a disaster after many, many years of French control and others' controls. And he put in a sweeping number of changes which just changed their life enormously. And I think we can be very proud of that guy, what he achieved out there. And again, if you don't read these biographies, you'd never learn any of that kind of stuff. But what that guy did in Canada, and his father before him was a naval captain. He did amazing work for Canada in the war there. So I mean, it's just amazing what you can learn. But as I say, digging deep, I mean, I've got to the point where I don't accept any answers from politicians because, frankly, I don't think they know enough. And the local councils, I mean, they're pretty ordinary people that seem to get onto these councils, and they don't seem to have any great intelligence or breadth of knowledge or anything. We certainly don't vote them in because they're clever. We usually vote them in because they're popular. But, you know, popular, you can be an idiot and still be popular, you know. I think in a lot of the ways the civil service are more to blame than anyone else. I'm sorry, I mean, civil service can answer back, but it does seem to me a lot of the civil service people don't agree with what's going on, and they provide bad facts and stuff like that. I don't know, I'm a bit wary of the civil service. But certainly right now we've got this Yemen crisis, which they seem incapable of sorting out. We've got the Myanmar problem, you know, with these Rohingya people that have all been kicked out of Burma. You know, I mean, that's just unacceptable. And of course you've got the tensions in Africa as well, where like Somalia, I mean, they just keep having civil wars there. Unfortunately, they're all stunted mentally, these people. And somehow we need to sort things out. I think the United Nations has become a spineless organisation, in my view. It should have much more power in the world to sort out these major issues and major problems. And as I say, coming home, I mean, I don't really understand why Scotland needs independence anymore. I mean, there was a point where, yes, we could have had a lot more money if Scotland's oil, but as we all know, Scotland's oil's, well, we still got it. We might make a few 100 million out of it. I mean, we're not making the 7, 8, 9, 10 billion that we used to make. And that's gone for good. It's never going to happen again. But likewise, you know, like where I am here in Canada, I can't understand why they won't just get those pipelines to the shores. I mean, if I was China, I'd say, we don't want to talk trade with you until we can get oil. Once we get oil, we'll talk about everything. But if we can't get oil from you, we're not interested in talking to you at all. Trudeau needs to get that message. I mean, how stupid is it to have the second largest reserves of oil in the world and only be able to move it to the USA? That's the only market. It's impossible for us to move it anywhere else. We can't get it shipped to the ports to get out. We could be making billions in Canada, billions every year. And I'm calling the Green Movement and many of the First Nations people traitors to the country. They are literally traitors. Oil is by far pipelines are by far the safest way to move oil. We need to get that to one coast at least so we can actually get our oil out and make some decent money. Because the US is a captive market, the oil price, as you know, is low, but it's even lower because America knows where the only market. So they stuff us. You have to give them a fairly huge discount for them to buy it. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's just mind-blowingly stupid. I don't understand these green people. To me, a lot of them are traitors to the country, in all honesty. I mean, it's like Scotland. Oh, we're all these great wind farms. Well, yeah, none of the wind farms were actually built in Scotland with Scottish products or anything. I mean, it's appalling. Why aren't they being built in Scotland, as I ask myself? Why is all the steel for the so-called Queensferry crossing built from steel from outside of Scotland? I mean, just pathetic. I don't know what it is about politicians. They seem incapable of doing anything sensible. And let's say we come to Brexit. I mean, I just think Brexit is a phenomenal opportunity. Do you know, by 2050, they say that China will be the largest trading bloc, then India, then the USA will be third, and then Indonesia. But you know, if you think of the Commonwealth, by 2050, the Commonwealth should be the largest trading bloc in the world by some margin, far bigger than China. The Commonwealth. That's what we need to get our heads around. The Commonwealth could be great. Unfortunately, the Commonwealth, the people that run the office for the Commonwealth in the UK are pathetic individuals, in my view. They won't respond to emails, they don't acknowledge your emails, they don't reply to anything, they don't communicate. Their communications team should be sacked, literally, or whoever organised the communication should be sacked. They need to get someone in that can ensure if they receive an email, they respond to it. And you can go to the press office to ask for information, they never respond. Sacked. I mean, I'm getting fed up of giving excuses to these pathetic people that can't respond. We're in a world of email these days. If you can't handle email, then you shouldn't have a job in communications. End of story. And you should also have someone that has an arbitrator, that's someone that will read your email if you use the right to complain about something not happening. There should be some way you can totally guarantee to get a message to someone. But unfortunately, the Commonwealth in Britain is pathetic that way. Most useless bloody communications team in the world, bar none. And you know, I'm coming more and more to the view that these CEOs of these big, massive multinational companies are pathetic in themselves. They seem to be politicians, but the management of their operation is pathetic. I mean, I'm looking at Verizon and Comcast, these kind of big companies. Do you know, they're wasting hundreds of millions of dollars just through sheer bad management. You know, when I was with Verizon, and it happened again with Comcast, salespeople could sell me a plan that physically could not be delivered. I remember one guy at Comcast, I talked to an tech engineer, and he said, Alistair, we physically don't have the bandwidth available to give you what they've sold you. We can only give you on copper. We haven't yet put fibre in to those area to serve you. So he said, physically, we cannot give you that bandwidth. End the story. So the fact you're selling you that, and he said, I'll prove it. And he gave me a URL to go to. He said, get your guy in Michigan to actually run this test and let you know what's happening. And we did. And the guys had said something like we get, I don't know what it was, 100 megabyte bandwidth or something. But when we actually ran the test, we're getting a hell of a lot less than that. And that proved that what the guy had sold us wasn't being delivered. So we went back to them and said, look, we've done this test, you're not delivering. Why aren't you delivering it? You said we would get it, and that's why we're paying this extra money. No, they got it all wrong. They got it all wrong. But unfortunately, it's the management, because the management were allowing the sales team to sell us products that they couldn't deliver. That's management, and that's a management issue. And that comes to the CEO, because he should be appointing proper managers that ensure that staff know what they're selling and can deal honestly with the customer. So how much is your company paying for something that you're not getting delivered? I don't know. There's a lot wrong in the world today. And as I say, when it comes back to Scottish independence, I've got the view that nowadays, frankly, we have far too many issues. I mean, you just got to look at the Brexit process. It's complex enough. But I mean, you untangle 300 years of tying between Scotland and England, or Scotland and the rest of the UK. I mean, that's going to be like a nightmare compared to Brexit. And then they say, if you look at the fact that we sell, what, 2/3 of our products to England, England's our best market, for God's sake. I mean, it's ridiculous that we should want independence at this stage. And if Scotland wants to go into the EU, I mean, I detect there's some retraction, because I think they now realise they won't get into the EU once we leave. And so they keep talking about EFTA now. But you know, at the end of the day, if we're going to leave, we leave. Let's forget about keeping, I mean, if you get a good trade deal, fine, but if you're under the single market, or you're under EEA, or you're under the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, you have to comply with their rules. End the story. And a lot of these rules won't let you do trade deals with the world. Or if they do, it'll be a very small trade deal compared to what you could have done if you're totally independent. That's why I can't understand Ruth Davidson. I mean, again, where is she getting her advice from? Where is she getting that advice? Who's advising her that she's so stupid about these basic things? I mean, I read an article about remaining in the EEA and how it could be successful for us. But it would take a generation to change the laws and everything like to let us trade freely with the world. I mean, and the people that we've got don't seem to have the common sense to know how to do that at the moment. So I think there's a lot of problems there. So personally, in 2018, I hope that we decide to say, look, forget about independence for Scotland. Scotland's already a distinctive part of the United Kingdom with its own legal system and stuff. We're probably going to get more devolved powers. It's about like the old Devo Max. So we can make a mess of our country. You know, that's not a problem. I mean, let's be honest about it. Nothing in our country is working really well. We've still got this huge disparity between the poor and the rich. That's not been fixed by so-called left-wing government. You know, our health service, our education, our justice system, none of it's working the way it should be working. The SNP are now hiding reports because they can't face up to bad criticism. I mean, I want a Scotland that's open to the people. We're honest and transparent. If we make a mistake or make a mistake in judgment, then let's just accept it. Because, none of us can go through life without making mistakes. So, we've got to allow politicians to make mistakes. But if they've made mistakes and it's obviously causing us issues, we need to understand who gave you the advice that caused you to make that mistake. We want to know the people that gave you the bad advice, because clearly you can't trust those people in the future. And you've got to understand why they gave you that bad advice. And we've got to figure out how we get good advice in the future so that we do things right. And that's why I want transparency. I mean, if a guy gets it wrong, he gets it wrong. Let's accept that, move on. But the moving on is we want to know why you made the decision that you did. We want to understand the process you went through to make that decision. And then we want to make sure that we get other people in that can help you make better decisions. That's what we need. Transparency, for Pete's sake. So, as I say, there's problems in Canada as well, because I think the finance minister and our prime minister in Canada have found, apparently they've been censored for taking advantage of their positions. They haven't gone to the standards committee, didn't get things approved that they should have got approved, just took great holidays and cost a small fortune, but they thought it was just a holiday. But in fact, I think it was the Aga Khan with Justin Trudeau. He's got a problem with that because he said he's a personal friend, and yet looking at the research, he's hardly ever met personally with him. So if you're a personal friend and meet once every 10 years, well, is that really a friend as such? And apparently he took some of his cabinet with him, so he's been censored for that. And quite rightly too, I think, to be honest. But that's the problem. Politicians, I don't know. I sometimes think you should have a minimum standard for being a political leader. I think you need to have a certain level of education at least. But I don't know. Things for the future, I'm not sure. Certainly, I think with all the problems in the world, we're set up to have them for another generation at least. The kids need to be helped. I think the kids are getting very bad advice. A lot of them are going to universities to get degrees, get the degrees, and they end up working in Tim Hortons. Nothing wrong with working in Tim Hortons, but the degree is meant to give you a high salary and good prospect. But apparently most of the degrees are worthless. Business don't want these people. What does getting that degree bring to the table as far as work's concerned? Nothing. Well, go away. We don't want you. And it's costing a lot of money to get an education at university. So, I think we want to be encouraging people to do apprenticeships because, we need plumbers, we need carpenters, we need plumbers, we need the basic trades, and you can actually make a very good living as an experienced craftsman. You can make an extremely good living as a craftsman. So I think more people should be directed to colleges that provide that kind of training and be given apprenticeships and so forth. Don't stuff them in universities where a lot fail, they don't complete their courses, and when they do, get a lot of the degrees that come through are just ordinary degrees that don't get you anywhere or get you anything. I think if you're going to be paying your kids to go to university, you should insist they go for a degree that would actually give them a decent living at the end of it and hopefully get them a job. But if you're going for general degrees, I think it's a total waste of time, in my view. But I think we need to look at education. I think we need to look really, because clearly a lot of parents have been badly educated themselves. And we need to kind of re-educate our parents. Maybe we need to give them a 2-week course every year on parenting, or to allow them to understand what's going on in the world or something. But I think that's the problem, that we don't get enough proper advice. A lot of parents can't even cook. don't even know how to cook. I mean, how pathetic is that? I can cook. Not saying I'm a great cook, but I really normally enjoy what I do cook. And I very rarely buy anything outside. I don't use takeaways. Or very rarely do I use a takeaway. Very rarely do I go out and buy a coffee from Starbucks or Tim Hortons or McDonald's. That's actually very rare for me to do that. Usually I only do it when I'm in Toronto staying with my friend Nola, because on the whole she's allergic to hot drinks, tea and coffee. I don't know how you can be allergic to that, but she is. She doesn't have any tea and coffee, so I tend to just go down to Tim. I tend to go to McDonald's, and I get an egg and sausage McMuffin and a kind of medium coffee there. But usually when I'm at home, I just make my own coffee. I make my own breakfast sandwich and stuff like that. So, as I say, I don't really use these places very much. Like pizzas, I think pizzas are ridiculous. The food value you get from a pizza is pretty low, and you pay a small fortune for it. So, anyway, so what am I hoping for in 2018? Well, I hope, I would really love to get away from this confrontational situation we've got it in America. You know, you either love or hate Trump. Seems to be a very little middle road on that. And as I say, you either want Brexit or you don't want Brexit, and both sides are extremes in their views and their attempts to do things. I mean, I just wish, as far as Brexit goes, that people just accepted we're going to be leaving, and let's get the best deal we can, and let's move on to the future. Let's have an optimistic future. I was talking to a Dutchman who's a Canadian, and he thinks Britain's going to go down the hill as soon as Brexit's over. But I think he's a bit anti-Britain, and I don't know why he's anti-British, but I think he is anti-British, because everything he's said over many years of knowing him, he tends to poo-poo Britain. But I've got to tell you, the British Empire was a wonderful time in our history, and what we achieved was just amazing all over the world. I think maybe that's why his nose is a bit out, because obviously we did very well in the world, and okay, the 2 world wars really is what hit us for 6, because everyone took advantage of us in these 2 world wars, so that's bad news. But I think Britain can come back very strongly, and as part of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth will end up being the largest trading bloc in the world by 2050. I'm quite convinced of that. And so we'll be part of the largest trading bloc in the world. And as it stands, we're the 5th largest trading nation anyway in the world right now. So, we're a big, important part of the world economy, one way or another. And we still have a lot of very good, clever people that do things. I'm looking forward to Dyson's new electric car coming out. I think that's going to be a big watershed. I remember, was it Sinclair that came out with the wee computer? He came out with a car, which was terrible. So I'm hoping we don't have another situation like that. But I think Dyson's different, to be honest, and he's working on battery technology. So, and I think battery is going to be key to the future of electric cars. So I'll be interested to see what he's coming up with. I'm really interested in that. And of course, he's a great backer for just dealing with the EU under WTO terms, because he already deals them under WTO terms. Because he's spent a fortune fighting the EU bureaucracy. So, I don't know. I kind of just wish people would say, look, Britain's going to leave the EU, end the story. So let's just do the best we can. Let's start talking Britain up. Because if you keep talking us down, who's going to want to do a free trade deal with us? So if you're talking Britain down, you're a traitor to Britain. It's as simple as that. You are a traitor to to Britain. It's like in Canada, these First Nations people, not all First Nations, but First Nation people that object to the pipeline going through, and the Green Party, they are actually traitors to Canada. We could have been making hundreds of billions, we could be making trillions in income. But these people have denied us that money and that income. They've denied it to us. They should be put in prison. I mean, it's just highly stupid. The second largest oil reserves in the world, and we can't even get it to market. How stupid is that? These Greens should be in prison. And too many First Nations people are greedy. They're not prepared to work, and they're not prepared to work as Canadians. Luckily, some First Nations are. I mean, that's the one thing I wish in Canada we'd be more open about the First Nations people. They get millions and millions and millions in federal money, but they don't need to report what they've done with that money. And so many times it's appearing that when an auditor went in to check one tribe, they came back and said, we can't trace 80% of the money. There's no paperwork trail for 80% of the money that was given to them. Now that's just wrong. People should go to prison for that. But we seem to always again, it's this Greens and the Liberal lobby. Oh, we've got to apologise for everything. Well, that's just rubbish. I mean, John A. Macdonald, the most successful Prime Minister that led to Confederation of Canada, and of course Canada's just celebrated its 150 years an independent country. Now they want to take the name John A. Macdonald off everything. I mean, it's just pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. We should tell these First Nations people to go take a hike. That's just going to extremes. They want to exterminate everything that's good that's gone on in this country. Just extreme. And I say, I have written or emailed or phoned, almost all First Nations people in Canada. None of them have given me anything. Nothing. Zero, zilch, nothing. No report. I just asked, have you got an official history of your tribe? No response. No one replies to emails. No one. I mean, the people I talked to on the phone will say, oh yeah, we'll send you this, that, the next thing. In the end, they put the phone down and said, up him. Never send me anything. They lie. Now, if you lie about that, what else are you lying about? I'm sorry, I thought to myself the First Nations would be a bit like clans, maybe, and stuff like that. And I think they are a bit like clans, because a lot of the clans couldn't give a damn about their people. They only cared about them when having people that could go to battle was important. But as soon as they could no longer use them as a bargaining chip, they just ditched them. And of course, a lot of these clan chiefs weren't even Scottish. They were actually from Normandy in France. You know, so you have to look at the background of all of these things. So that's, I suppose that's my view of it in 2017. We seem to be just more angry at everything and everyone. And there's no sense of compromise anywhere for the greater good. And I think it's time people were called to account for that kind of thing. Because, you know, while you might disagree with something, at the end of the day, we need to work together. We need to get on together if the country's to progress. I mean, I was willing to give the SNP a go, but to be honest, I think the SNP is an absolute disaster for Scotland. I think it's held us back enormously, and we've got to get rid of the Sturgeon, the whiner. She whines about everything. Whines about everything. She's even whining about the new blue passport that Britain will have after leaving the EU. I mean, why? I mean, that shouldn't even be bothered in the slightest. But she wants to give you a big whine about the whole thing. That shows her mental case. Mentally, she's stunted. She's tremendous at not answering questions, tremendous at not taking responsibility for anything. It's always everyone else's fault, never her fault, never the SNP's fault. And that's just impossible. You can't get everything right, no one can. But the trouble is, the SNP, I think, are a problem, because who is there to be the leader for the future? They all speak the same voice, have the same response to every question. That's great, but unfortunately that means we've got a lot of faceless people in the SNP. Where are the characters? Where are the people with real vision and stuff? We don't know, because we don't know who they are, because they can't speak up and become a personality. It's Sturgeon or nothing. And in the end, Sturgeon, I think, is damaging Scotland badly. And I think it's time they got rid of her and brought someone else in with new views, new vision, and more honesty with people, and be willing to use experts from across the divide, no matter whether they're conservatives or communists or whatever. You know, if they've got good ideas, let's listen to them. So I guess that's my plea for the new year, is that hopefully we can be a bit more open and willing to look at other avenues to be successful as a nation, both Canada and both Scotland as well. So anyway, that's my kind of general chat, which I thought I would just go. And I'd like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a happy and successful New Year. And I look forward to doing some more of these videos in the new year when things come up that I think might be worth listening to. And if you have any thoughts about what you'd like me to speak about or anything like that, feel free to leave a comment and ask me if I have views on something or other, and I'm willing to do a wee video if I've got anything to contribute on that front. So okay, thanks very much for listening, and as I say, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year when it comes. Thanks.